Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Alan Wake 2 on PS5. 13 years. It has been 13 years since Alan Wake, the fictional writer of the now connected Remedy game universe, or whatever the fuck they in the media are calling it now, dove into the bleak void of Cauldron Lake at the end of the game that bears his name, and since I wrapped credits on that game. A lot has happened in that time. Family and pets have been lost. A wife and new friends have been gained. Career changes and cross-country moves were made. A lot of games came out. But for the character of Alan Wake, no time has passed at all. Was it worth the wait? Let's get into that as I discuss 2023's Alan Wake 2. Before I go any further, I need to shout out the patrons of Deleted Saves. This is the first game powered by the patrons of the show. Alan Wake 2 was sort of on my radar since its announcement, and I wasn't going to touch it for some time, as disbursement of money for me with real-life bills is always the forefront of my mind. But I was able to get this game a lot faster due to the generous donations of the folks who are willing to help this show out, all of whose names you will hear at the end of this review. I should also shout out Eric over at the Unlockables podcast, who referenced me on Twitter, or X, or Elon's personal bizarre anti-yet pro-corporate fuckhut, or whatever we're forced to call this arm of social media because we're all just out here trying to flog our own shows to the public, to look to my show for the definite review of Alan Wake 2. Okay, everyone, let's hope it was worth the wait. Over a year ago, when I released my review for the original Alan Wake, I went in depth to explain the connection I felt with the title character. Being an artist or creator can be difficult, as so often it involves a level of honesty that most people are going to be uncomfortable with, either for yourself or something you may listen in the audience. Some people don't give a fuck either way, and they can fuck right off then. But oftentimes you are putting some form of yourself out there to the public for public abuse, whether that be your thoughts, your beliefs, your weird ideas, or sometimes darker things like thoughts you wouldn't share in public for a lot of reasons, fetishes, hate, anger, and the like. And some creators, honestly, have an easier time than others. Some are so talented in their field they cannot help but be successful immediately, and their frankly awful behavior is usually excused, especially if they are big moneymakers for shrewd businessmen. Some find an appreciative audience for trash and exploitation that the snobs and critics would never touch. It's okay to be a fucking hack if you make something people like. The rest of us toil in obscurity, hopefully finding an opening into the creative field usually once someone else dies. And one of the things we need to discuss about Alan Wake, the character, is that he is a cipher. He is a complete asshole to everyone around him, including his loved ones and close friends. Let's be honest, most artists aren't that good at people at heart. We're fucking human beings, not saints, you chuckle fucks. Yeah, sometimes you meet your favorite celebrity, performer, artist, whatever, and they're nice. Mostly if you caught them in a good mood. Some are just mean-spirited shits from the get-go. Many will happily backstab one another for more money and a better chance to get their shit seen. But mostly being an open conduit for impulse and emotion sucks and can be turbulent. And again, if you're out there listening to this and thinking you should play the world's tiniest violin for the creatives in your life, may I offer to break that tiniest violin over your teeth. But Wake is a cipher, a representation of all the ill will and negative emotion his creators could pour into him, Sam Lake primarily. And for a story about a writer, this game sure as fuck needed an editor. But to summarize the events of the previous game, New York Times bestselling writer in another reality gets such a severe case of writer's block that he imposter syndromes himself into a new level of personal clarity about his questionable talent, wherein his long-suffering wife takes him to the middle of nowhere Washington to see a shrink that specializes in artists. Things go wrong because the town is lorded over by a witch whose husband in her previous life was an auteur poet or something, and something called the Dark Presence that feeds on art and tricks said writer into killing half the townsfolk when it turns them into shadow doppelgangers that are weak to light and bullets, until he David Lynches himself into success and disappears into the darkness of that lake just as his wife, who disappeared into it before the inciting incident, is jettisoned out of it, and all is not well. Also, there's a pair of aging heavy metal artists in town, like two drowsy Ozzy Osbournes, that tie into this as both comic relief and the most epic music set showpiece boss battle I've ever played. Alan Wake was only loosely described as a survival/action horror title, but it is truly more of a thriller. Something that would have fit into a John Grisham or James Patterson model of boilerplate writing, instead of a Clive Barker or Robert McCammon type. But it was not so much a thriller, but also a TV show, as Remedy was heavily influenced by Lynch's Twin Peaks show, with references back to the Twilight Zone and whatever Finnish emo post-rock that Remedy could stuff into it, because if it's in your backyard, why not use it? Are we all caught up now, kids? Good. However, as much as I would like to go directly into the game today, I actually can't. I have to address Remedy's catalog. Why? Because the team decided to cram all of it into Alan Wake 2 in one way or another. While it is not necessary that you play Max Payne, Quantum Break, the previous Alan Wake, or Control, you better have done so anyway, because they are all there in one form or another and are referenced. So already a huge fucking point against it. Max Payne 1 and 2 were fun pieces of modern noir fiction, hammy and overdone, but ultimately so were anything by Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, and people love them, so who cares? I never played Quantum Break, and I never will because I couldn't care less. And Control was a verifiable piece of shit that I'm sorry I ever laid my hands on. Now, I have to treat Alan Wake 2 like I just binged all of them yesterday. Fuck me. But if I were to, in a few words, sum up the experience, I would say it was like this. Saga Anderson, a black Swedish woman and one of our protagonists, discusses Alan Wake with Max Payne, while Remedy insists on fucking them and all of us up the ass with the massive spiked and razor-edged dildos of the Federal Bureau of Control, while Twin Peaks The Return blares in the background. Let's get into this. The first thing I have to praise for this game, and to give praise for Remedy Entertainment doing, is that they went full-on survival horror with Alan Wake 2. Instead of pussyfooting around it with shadow-cloaked locals muttering incoherent phrases and just saying to the player, "Ooh, look, spooky, scary kids," like a bad Halloween haunted house. It is obvious from the behind-the-shoulder camera to the claustrophobic presentation that Resident Evil 2 Remake was the model for this game, and thank whatever old Norse god was listening. There are times in the game, though, it feels like Remedy was taking the piss out of the genre. Maybe they were. Maybe many folks feel someone did need to take the piss out of survival horror, and Remedy was as good a choice as any for that. But then again, over 74 million people voted for Donald Trump in 2020, and around 49% of the adult US populace claims it believes in Christianity in some form or another, so we do know that millions of people can, in fact, be dead wrong about things. Anyway, our game begins with our protagonist Saga Anderson, an FBI agent, driving up through the brooding Pacific Northwest forest to Bright Falls, Washington, along with her partner Max Payne. Sam Lake. God damn it, Alex Casey. The real-life Alex Casey, who hates Alan Wake for having a tough-as-nails, hard-drinking, multi-divorcee main character who shares the same name as him. It has been 13 years since the events of Alan Wake I, and don't worry if you forgot, the game will happily remind you over and over it has been 13 fucking years. Just like it will remind you that Alan Wake is a writer. Get it yet, shitheels? Get your notepad if you can't keep up with all of Sam Lake's brain drippings in order. So why does the FBI come here? Well, it's not for Alan, because he's a writer and this is America, goddammit. Nobody gives a shit about him or writers in general because he isn't some overblown, emotionally stunted high school jock who loves to play with his balls so that Americans can bet their paychecks on him. Believe me, if it had been Tom Brady who disappeared into the woods of Washington state, the entire country would have ground to a halt until he was found, and Brady Watch 2023 would have been the only thing on CNN and Fox News, easily pushing aside the what is it now, 2 or 3 active genocides worldwide we are seeing as the time of this recording. Mainly they are there because the cliche dopey as shit local bumfuck sheriff's deputies have a murderous cult problem on their hands, and as much as they would like to completely obviously like to pin the murders on the only 2 black people in town who stumbled in on a vacation to search out Alan Wake's mystery for themselves and be done with it, their boss has at least a functioning brain and summoned the feds. Worse, the latest corpse to wash ashore at the local witch lake is an ex-federal agent, the one who went missing chasing Alan Wake 13 years ago, an agent named Nightingale. Oh boy. Saga, who is lovely, smart, adroit, take charge, and loves mysteries, is given the lead on the case by Casey, and she begins to assess the case immediately. Here we are introduced to Saga's mind place, her brain space, a riff on the Mind Palace, where she assembles all the clues and makes startlingly accurate deductions about where to go and what to do next based on the profiles and case clues. Almost like she were a character, like Sherlock Holmes. Oh, don't worry, we'll come back to this. The Mind Place is awesome. I loved it. But you need to be careful where to deploy this tactic because as you do, it does not pause the action. Your body is in physical danger if you do this somewhere unsafe. They take the body of Nightingale back from Cauldron Lake to the Bright Falls Sheriff's Office to do the autopsy. And we meet Sheriff Tim Breaker, cousin to the original sheriff, and it is the same actor who played the main character of Quantum Break, who I found out after I did some research because Remedy couldn't add this to the game directly because they lost the rights. His name is even a joke. Tim Breaker? Time Breaker? Get it? Yeah, me either. Anyway, while doing the autopsy, the heartless cadaver of Nightingale gets up off the table and starts killing everyone and is a Taken, the shadow-cloaked killers of the stories, who are real people taken over by the dark presence because they gave in to their petty hates and rage. Saga only survives because a light envelops her, and the Taken cannot see into the light. She gets her gun, shoots Nightingale enough to get him to absolutely vanish, and then recovers herself and Casey, who has also survived. The bumbling deputies arrive and don't seem to give much of a shit that their fellow officers died, where in the real world gunfire in a police station tends to bring the whole station, and Saga and Casey need to return to the lake immediately. But also the sheriff completely vanishes, and no one asks where or why. Great. Upon the return to the lake, Saga must perform a magic ritual with Nightingale's heart to enter an overlap, a place where reality and fiction meet, and enter it to kill Nightingale, which she does. It is in the overlap she meets Wake, who has been trying to get out of the dark place for the last 13 years by rewriting reality constantly, and so far unsuccessfully. After her success, Wake is sped out into the shores of Cauldron Lake, and the FBI scoops him up to explain to him what has happened and to get his side of things. It is at this point the real meat of the game begins. At rest points, which are in well-lit closets or huts and shit, you can switch between Saga and Alan for the rest of the game. Which, while both have flashlights to dispel darkness, each has their own set of weapons and goals, so Alan Wake 2 is, in fact, 2 games in 1. And almost never do the 2 paths meet or overlap. Already I am very happy with this. Saga's adventure takes place while exploring Bright Falls, Cauldron Lake, and nearby Watery, a Finnish immigrant town that is home to Coffee World with the world's most caffeinated moose, and the Koleska brothers, motorcycle club, and their dangerous adventure tours business. The Koleskas also have TV ads throughout town, which have taken the place of the Night Springs episodes from the previous game, and they have been purposely made bad. Remedy loves, to the point of their detriment, doing these little side shows and sight gag video skits that they like to cram into their games like tentacles into a hentai character. Control was so choked with the fucking things it utterly killed the momentum and experience for me, along with all the other problems I had with it. But that's covered in a completely different episode of this show. Remedy calmed their collective tits down on this game, with these skits at least, and made them more highly relevant to the plot. Alan's adventure takes place almost entirely within the Dark Place, his own version of hell, in which, in this case, looks like New York City, which is also a form of hell. But in this case, Alan will traverse the same 3 blocks over and over and over again, killing the momentum of the game. Alan's chapters are far less interesting and more annoyingly monochromatic than Saga's, but they are integral to the plot. Oh boy. Anyway, because I can't review this game for 3 fucking hours straight, here's moving things along in the story. Saga begins to realize that somehow reality is rewriting itself, and people recall her as a local, despite the fact that she's not from here, and that her daughter drowned when the kid is home safe in Virginia with her father. Saga realizes Wake has written her into the story as a hero, but in return, as it is a horror story, it is a dark tale, and Saga is the subject of loss, which she is fucking pissed about, as one could imagine. Also, Saga learns more about her family here. Saga is multiracial, but she knows little about her family history. Her mom, of Swedish descent, left her hometown because of her dad, Saga's grandfather. Saga's father is never seen or discussed, only that he died long ago. Guess what? Turns out, and this is not part of the story Wake is writing, her grandfather is Tor Anderson, the drummer of the Old Gods of Asgard, one of the heavy metal geriatrics that helped Alan Wake in the first game, who were known for their wild debauches and chart toppers in the 1970s and 1980s, akin to Ozzy and Motorhead, and who now live in their own retirement home called Valhalla, bought by Alan Wake's old agent, Barry Wheeler, who certainly doesn't know from metal and is sick of working with artists. The Old Gods are played by Remedy's in-house pet band, the Poets of the Fall, and yeah, that's about all I know and give a shit about. If you like their music, awesome. And, oh, this gets better, dear listeners. It turns out Thor and his brother Odin are magic. That's right, magic old folks. And that Saga's mind place is not because of her intelligence or acumen and experience as a detective and investigator. Instead, Saga's actually a prophetess, blessed by her Viking blood and the old Norse gods, who was able to tell people's inner thoughts because her granddad was able to do the same thing, making her a magic black woman. Oh, holy hot fuck. I wonder how long it's going to take before someone with an axe to grind about modern culture and other things we can do nothing about takes umbrage with that. Maybe it won't happen, but who knows. I was so utterly disappointed by this reveal. I really feel Remedy could have gone any other direction and done this better, but at least they did try to make it work well within their own fiction, for as stupid as this reveal is. As far as Wake, well, he is both here in reality for a bit, but mostly in the dark place. He keeps reappearing on a talk show called In Between with Mr. Door. Mr. Door is supposed to have been played by Lance Reddick, but unfortunately he died. So they chose to utilize the skills of David Harewood. Why does this matter? Because this is supposed to be another Quantum Break and Control reference, where Reddick played Mr. Hatch. Hatch? Door? Portals? Get it? Yeah, me either. This talk show gets more hostile over time, and the Old Gods are the house band. Wake steps out into the New York nights to explore the same streets, alleys, subway tunnel, and payphone over and over. He confronts and kills his fictional Alex Casey, confronts and kills Thomas Zane, the helpful dark place figure from Alan Wake 1, where he was a poet but is now a filmmaker, something even the game questions the continuity of. But it turns out Zane is Alan Wake's evil double, Mr. Scratch. And the two of them wrote the crux of the reason for Alan's being trapped here, a novel called Return, over a drunken month where the two of them partied, drank, did drugs, and co-wrote a book and movie based on this idea in a scene reminiscent of the Doors movie, or something like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Door is also a villain in the end, and a magical black man trope too, threatening Alan to not mess with the affairs of him and do not go off script with what the Dark Place has planned for him. So the developers are trying to shitcan whatever continuity didn't work from the last game, while at the same time acknowledging it and trying to pretty it up to fit with Control. This game would have been so much better if they didn't keep trying to shove control in our faces damn near constantly. The best thing that the Dark Place does with this game, in between light switching puzzles and retreading the same 5 places, is this. Wake is often confronted with shadows, most of which can be easily dispelled with keeping your flashlight on them without wasting precious few resources, which is genuinely creepy, until you get one that is real and attacks, leading to a good old survival horror gunfight. The other thing it does well is the Ocean View Hotel level, an expanded reference to the Ocean View Motel levels of Control. Again, go fuck yourself, Remedy. This was stupid then, and didn't get much better now. But they turned this into a level onto a twisted, dimension-hopping haunted house murder mystery, loaded with dangerous shadows and red lighting. And goddamn if it isn't the creepiest and best level in the game. This is in stark contrast to the level in the Dark Place, that is the worst. That level here in the Dark Place, you must enter and run through Mr. Door's studio during an entire rock opera. Now, I get a lot of people in games, and the game's influence sphere, love this shit show of a level because, I don't know, they are all frustrated theater kids or something, or just really love rancid show tunes. But excuse me while I pull out my soapbox. Ahem. Rock operas fucking suck. Fuck you, fuck them, fuck your empty-headed ideas. This level was absolute horse shit. It was a boring series of running gunfights of taken enemies, with the real-life actor playing Alan Wake, Sam Lake, and the Poets of the Fall in their various character outfits, gyrating on 30-foot screens, while you control this tight corridor fight in empty hallways with neon strobes, while the filmed actors will sometimes cheekily point off screen to tell the player where to go. It looked like somebody fucking off-Broadway modern art interpretive dance skit with less bodysuits and exposed penises. I'm all for fourth wall breaks here, but this is more shittily done than that old TV show Cop Rock, and there's a good fuck reason that shit was canceled after 11 episodes. Yeah, I know many of you listening weren't alive yet when Cop Rock was on the air, but look it up. If you liked Glee, but thought it needed more armed patrol officers, I guess that shit is for you. This whole section was just bad, self-indulgent, narcissistic, and horrendous. It should not be praised. Also, with how much I was honestly distracted by this epileptic's trip in their darkest netherworld, I ended up dying repeatedly, and it lost what little charm it had very quickly. Anyway, soapbox away with one more hearty go fuck yourself to whomever greenlit this stage, and to anyone who praised it. As I said, Wake is also in the real world, for this stage anyway. He is attacked at the Bright Falls Hotel along with Casey by the local cult, the Cult of the Tree, who killed Nightingale originally. Here's some more reveals in this spoiler-tastic episode. This cult is run by the Kaleska brothers, and they have actually been using it to protect Bright Falls ever since the events of 2010 from the Taken, who keep getting vomited up by the lake in its repeated oceanic black void. Turns out they are the good guys, waiting for Wake's return to kill him, as they rightly believe he's infected by Mr. Scratch. And now that Wake is out, so is the Dark Presence, which hits Casey instead. And just when it couldn't get any worse, the Federal Bureau of Control shows up to bungle the whole operation. Jesus fuck Christ. By the end, the wheels are about to come off this speeding semi. Wake is still in the Dark Place, yet here, Casey and Wake get infected by Scratch. Saga is magically prophetessing her way across town, and the FBC is standing there practically yelling, "Hey, did you play the Alan Wake DLC for Control? Did you? You really should have." I'll admit, it was funny. That is a throwaway line during one of these overlaps between Saga and Alan, where they do the majority of their talking to each other. Jesse Faden from Control breaks in just to say hi, literally, and is never heard from again. Anyway, Alan kills one of the Kaleska brothers in the form of Scratch when he phase shifts into his cell at the sheriff's station. Then Saga must shoot Alan in a literal rip from Control battle where she can't kill him until she shines floodlights on him. This shit happens twice, mind you. Once at the sheriff's station, and once again at Cauldron Lake, where the old gods serenade you to open the portal between reality and the dark place in a shot-for-shot replay of the fight you did in the farm from the first Alan Wake title against the Horde of Taken, only with the FBC helping out. By the end, Saga gets flung into the dark place, the old gods literally disappear into the lake after her, Casey gets sucked into the dark place. Alan, now free from Scratch, must re-enter as he learned his wife Alice died by suicide years ago, as Scratch/Alan was haunting her from the dark place. Alan now understands he must write a new chapter from Scratch's book Return, in which he sacrifices the hero of the story. Saga, now there herself, obviously objects, and uses her psychic bullshit powers to talk to Wake directly once she is done getting over her doubt and fear and anger towards white folks telling her what to tell him they are now co-authors of the end of the story, and that it is Wake who will be sacrificing himself, which he agrees to because of his own guilt complex. I mean, they could have both just said, fuck it, nobody else is dying today, but hey, that's just me thinking out loud. But they will try to save everyone despite the fact that it's a horror story, especially her kid and partner, because Saga says Wake had no right to write them into the story, which I agree with, but then again I don't. It is a horror story, and as I have spoken about with decent horror stories before, almost no one survives and everyone is fair game. That's the crux of a horror story, after all. So Saga and Alan meet in his writing room, they draw Scratch out of Casey and into Alan, and Saga kills Wake with a bullet made of light to the forehead. As the credits begin, we aren't sure if Saga and Casey have escaped the dark place, and in the end credits sequence, Alice, Wake's wife from the first game, reveals she didn't kill herself after all, but jumped back into Cauldron Lake to help guide Alan home directly. And it turns out Alan isn't dead, but realizes that he has a chance to get out of the dark place because it's not a loop, it's a spiral. Fuck. Normally, I would do a critic's corner of this game, but with it being so fresh at this point, it is subject to recency bias. Most games I cover have had a few years behind them, and the scores have settled, but we'll do our best. Mostly 9.5s out of 10s as far as the score goes, which is hilarious as how much the first game was critically panned as time has gone on, to the point I was beginning to think I was the only one who even liked it. It is even, at time of this recording, up for Game of the Year at the 2023 Game Awards, which in reality has about as much prestige as any other award show does, which is to say if syphilis had a voice, it would be an award show announcer. So, absolutely, and I say this with my whole chest, fuck what any critic or quote-unquote professional gamers have to say here. Y'all can eat my entire dirty asshole at this time. So let's move on. What are my final thoughts on Alan Wake 2? It is a gorgeous, unnerving survival horror game. Like the genuine article. In that way, I am impressed. I love Saga, but Remedy did her dirty. I like Alan even more here. He has developed a personality rather than an angry, confused writer searching for his wife. But Remedy did him dirty for different reasons. I love Max Payne. I'm glad he's in this one. He's almost the comic relief, and I hope Rockstar Games never touches any more Max Payne games again. But it is way overindulgent, way overproduced, and too much in love with being a TV show instead of a game. Even for a European TV show, which if you find them on Netflix are far more grounded than the swill we make here in the States. It is just too much at many points in the game, to its own ruination. In no way is this Game of the Year material, but then again neither are any other co-nominees in that category this year. Maybe we need to do away with this arbitrary awards show fuckery and just let people like what they like, or don't like what they don't like. But if that happened, we'd be too much in danger of entering a golden age of humanity, where people are happy and free. We'd lay down our guns and hug like family. IQs would rise, poverty would vanish, and the rich and powerful would become poor and powerless, and all that good stuff. So no, we can't have that. I mean, We would be out of control. See what I did there? Huh? Huh? The boss battles are claustrophobic, yet bad arena fights in the dark. The gunplay is okay, but it's not Doom 2016 levels of smooth, so if you're hoping for that shit in a survival horror game, then you need to reassess your life. The enemies can get tedious rather than terrifying at times. The pace of the action is lopsided, yet there are surprises and genuine great ideas in the use of the detective modes, ambient sound, atmosphere, and some story beats that are more than others, more vetted and long-running game series could learn from. It is, at the end, a frustrating mixed bag. In my review of Alan Wake, I did lament my own failure as an artist, which have somewhat mitigated as the years have gone on. But Alan Wake 2 is too much in the opposite direction, where the artist is allowed to create unfettered without anyone stopping them. And the creator or creation is allowed to be so overdone it becomes its own self-parody. This is also bad for everyone, for both artist and viewer. But critics tend to tongue-bathe the overindulgent, so once again, fuck them. It is okay to have difficulties and recover from them. Build your own self-confidence to try again, or do things that you are happy with and produce things for an audience who likes you and what you make, regardless of size of audience. But it is not okay to get resentful over it and get swollen with your own self-importance and create, well, this. I did enjoy my time with Alan Wake 2, but I have to, as I have said, praise it and shit on it simultaneously. It deserves both in heaping handfuls. Many feel it deserves the praise, but I find it an overcorrection born out of misplaced guilt and too much time spent in front of the boob tube taking notes from more popular media to see if games can still be seen as legitimate art, an idea many are still chasing in 2023. Alan Wake 2 is a victim of someone's imposter syndrome, but here we are nonetheless. Play it anyway. Just realize if you didn't play Remedy's entire catalog, you'll miss stuff. I will say this in addition to the other hot takes here. It outdoes Silent Hill 2 in every way, to the point where, as another bigwig Turbosphere person said, we don't need Silent Hill anymore. Play this instead of Silent Hill 2 to get the same feeling Team Silent was going for. You'll thank yourself. As Wake himself says from at the beginning, in a horror story, there are only victims and monsters. I feel at the end, Alan Wake 2 has become both. Its own victim and its own monster. A bloated devourer, a demonic seductress hiding hideousness under a pretty hide. Yet it is the final girl of a slasher movie and the shattered survivor of a psychodrama all in one. It is its own heaven and its own hell. We are just along for the ride at times. I hope whatever sequel will inevitably come down the road, they are at least finishing this off and cleaning this up, as they have done definitely with the first game. No need to wake up this time. We're all too scared and wired to go back to sleep. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orton Wells, and Maslama for being generous patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.